Hi, I'm Linda Mal, and welcome to Art This Week. On this week's episode, we visit the Nasher Sculpture Center. This is part 2 of our interview with artist Phyllida Barlow about her exhibition, Tryst. Now for Art This Week.
I know that you don't make your work to be representational or symbolic or pictorial, but at the same time I wonder how much, for example, these events that you mentioned, environmental disasters, or events in human current affairs, wars or political structures that are in tension, how much of that might be having an effect on the work. Because even though I see a lot of playfulness and improvisation in a light way, I also see, maybe it's the scale, but works that could potentially obstruct or destruct each other or the space, that they could be pushing through the ceiling any moment if they were activated, or that if a viewer were to physically challenge them, they could be squashed. So I wonder how much the work might also be dealing with that tension and chaos
I think it's
in the world.
Absolutely fundamental to the work, because of the process of making sculpture. For me, it's about making and finding a way of making. You're beginning with the empty space, and my desire is to activate that empty space. But it's equally likely that the thing I begin will get destroyed and remade and repaired and remade again. So the idea of damage and reparation is inherent to my way of making. And that then, for me, reciprocates very much the activities of both ourselves, human beings, whether it's something as extreme as war and the, terrifying and terrible results of war, or the equally terrifying and terrible results of nature. This constant churning over and restlessness of how things become destroyed and then hopefully repaired, is inherent to my way of making work. It's as much a quest to find a process, to seek out a process that fits something of what the work is beginning to emerge as wanting to do. If I do have a subject, which I'm never sure that I do, it is about that cycle of damage and repair.
But it's something that's more, not necessarily in the subconscious, but it's in the background. You're not, for example, making a piece of work about Syria, but if it's on the news all the time, then maybe that's feeding in more than if you watch a romantic comedy. That's probably not going to be so much of an influence, or do you think everything is? I don't know.
I think the processes of making have always been there. They've been there for years. The idea of how you commit, or how I commit to something, but then that commitment has to change, and that's why I've used materials that will permit that change. So that's always been there. There's always been, for me, a doubt about what the subject is. But there are lots of things that come into play that have, in a way, added to that commentary on making. It's like looking at Buster Keaton films, or,
Jacques Tati.
Yes, exactly. The relationship of people with the physical world around them, and maybe it's an impossible relationship. It's completely a state of complete bewilderment about the world as it is, especially with, Jacques Tati's a wonderful example, a complete, absolute astonishment that you've got to press these buttons and a door opens and a fountain immediately goes on, a sort of questioning of, is this really the way the world is going? You know?
And I also think in playtime, when he's
running
up and down through these, it actually makes me think of your work now, but that's only because we've just talked about it. But you were saying how, you know, you in a way are guiding or suggesting different ways that someone can interact with the work. And in playtime, when he's got that job in that, and you're looking down and he's getting lost within all the cubicles,
absolutely,
and that the furniture becomes the sculpture or the installation. So I know that you, because of finances and space, in the earlier days, you would recycle or throw things away, which I think seems like a very freeing way to work and liberating, as well as actually a functional, practical way. But I'm also thinking about the materials you use and the fact that they're maybe in their huge quantity, they may not be cheap, but on their small quantity, you're using very democratic materials almost. You're not using gold or, you know, expensive materials that you might see often in the Saatchi gallery. I'm wondering if you choose those materials in a way, I don't know, consciously, but the fact that they're the materials that surround us every day, the average person like me, rather than the expensive marble and platinum of the wealthy.
I use them because they're expedient.
Okay.
And also I love them. You know, I love them on the street. If you look at a road that's been repaired several times, and the
patches,
the nuances of the different kinds of tarmac. I mean, it sounds crazy. Or the side of a house that has been repaired in different cements. It carries its own beauty, just in terms of how those different repairs are organized. And I think there's a modesty about those materials and an incredible versatility.
Also those scars also maybe make the character of that space, and when you eradicate that history, then you lose maybe an understanding of where you are. So do you think in a way these, I know you've said that sculpture is in the everyday, you see sculpture all around you, so you're just incorporating those materials into your sculptures, so it's like a meta sculpture.
I think it's really the most fundamental thing is the expedience. How can I begin to make something that I know is going to change? If I did that with gold leaf or something, I mean,
I just feel it would be boring, but then maybe that's my aesthetic.
I think I would, one, not be able to afford it, and two, the idea of, I mean, maybe it's a wonderful thing to do, kind of, you know, playing around with gold leaf at whatever it costs. It just doesn't interest me to get locked into something precious. Where there's got to be a kind of certain sure-footedness at the outset of the work. I want to allow a certain amount of uncertainty to be a very dynamic aspect of making work, a very creative force.
What do you think of people like John Cage and Fluxus and that kind of the chance and probability of things changing? Is that something that...
Absolutely. I think the chance of the accident, the thing that does fall over in the studio.
Not on the head of an audience member.
No, that is a sort of horror, actually.
Right,
you know? But the fact that you can even push something over to, you know, because you've got to that point with it where the relationship has broken down. And, you know, these are relationships. They're like everything that a relationship has, good days and bad days, quarrels and, you know, affection and all the rest of it. But there can be works which just refuse to yield what they want to be. And that's a point where I have to take control. Usually the work is very much in control. It's kind of pulling me along, that is the ecstatic relationship. When it becomes really problematic, I'm just adding and adding and adding and nothing is happening, then it needs a different kind of intervention. Either to be binned
start again,
or to be broken in two, or
so that
changed
element
drastically in some way, you know.
So the improvisation, the chaos of change, that's all part of it. And would you, I mean, I know people have talked about your work as far as like the fallen monument and that all is something in a playful, nature, or is it sinister, or does it matter?
I think for me it's inherent to how do the choices get made about what is to be celebrated and what is not. You know, that the monument is both the most wonderful sculptural form, you know, the upright phallic form, you know, that defies gravity, etc. But then what it also represents as commemoration, as a sort of serious thing for people who've lost their lives in terrible ways, or the glorification of individuals who quite honestly don't deserve it. So the sight of Saddam Hussein being pushed over must be one of the archetypal images.
Of the fallen dictator or
yes,
hero.
in the same way that the Twin Towers has become a tragic, iconic image. And so this bringing down of monumental structures, whatever they might be, carries with it extraordinary loaded narratives, some of which are truly, truly horrific. You know, the recent destruction in Syria of incredible artworks, you know, from thousands of years ago is the most recent tragedy, because in the destruction of those artworks, it's not just the objects, it's the lives who made those objects that are unknown individuals who don't have names to be celebrated, you know, and they're not just destroying the object, they're destroying that endeavor. And that is so, I find, absolutely
horrifying.
Tragic, yes, yeah. So yes, the monument to me carries with it, both in a sculptural sense, something phenomenal, but also in terms of the human need to identify something that's ambiguous and moves in many different directions.
As far as the scale of the work, I know that you've sometimes described the work as not being, in your eyes, big, but it is much larger than any human being, and they almost feel like they could house communities, some of these.
Yes,
and I wonder if you do sometimes see them as like mini villages in a weird, strange way.
I think they become their own community for me, you know. I think big is strange, isn't it? Here we are in a city with the remarkable Pei building, which you can't imagine who's inside that.
Absolutely.
I presume inside it's heaving with people, but it almost looks like a monument.
Right, absolutely. Well, these glass skyscrapers that we get in these sorts of cities, and we also see them in England, whereas these look, you know, without trying to transform them into something literal, but you know, when you go into shanty towns, or when you see photographs of shanty towns and you see how people have made every single mark, and this feels like every single part of it has, you know, it's the opposite of judge. You're not erasing the mark of human beings, you're celebrating it.
To me, therefore, the way these are put together, like the shanty town, everything is within my stretch. It's just when you begin to accumulate these
and combine it.
It becomes, and it's that accumulation of making something that goes bigger than myself that I'm intrigued by. I'm not trying to be a monumental sculptor maker, or whatever one calls it.
You just make a lot of work.
I'm just interested in the experience of how we experience the circularity of that experience of looking.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you both. Thank you, Kate.
Thanks,
Brilliant.
We want to thank Phyllida for speaking with us. For more information on the exhibition, go to NasherSculptureCenter.org. That's it for Art This Week. Thanks for watching.
still got your Polaroid. The thought of you I can't avoid. Sitting in your living room.
I love the provisional or the urgent, the half done, the abandoned, you know, all those qualities that are so prevalent in our world today, you know. Not everywhere it is finished and ready to go. You know, things are in all sorts of different stages of collapse and ruin and about to be restored, repaired, reclaimed. And, you know, you just had these storms in Texas